morning, everybody. Got a different kind of clock today. This is a little alarm clock. This was one my son had. I'd seen it at his house a couple times, and it wasn't running. You could wind up the alarm and set it, and it would run, and you can wind up the time, but it would not tick. It wouldn't stay running. It's got the little reflective hands and little dots outside of each hour for the reflection. And it said Mauthe on it. I wasn't real familiar with that company, but it was a pretty cute little clock. Somebody's taken some parts off of it. And so I started out researching who that clock company might be. Let me turn this super bright light off that I bought. And first off, I didn't even know how to say the name.
Mauthe.
Mauthe. So it's German, Mauthe.
Mauthe.
So it's not TH sound. Maut and then H. Mauthe.
Mauthe.
Able to find on Microlisk a couple of Mauthe brands, but not what was on this clock, because inside it says F. Mauthe. Which is Friedrich Mauthe, and he made clocks in Schwenningen, Germany. It doesn't show any kind of any emblem there. It says FR Mauthe, Germany. And on this site I found that he lived 1822 to 1844, and he started out supplying clockmaker tools, and then in 1860 he started his own founding company in Schwenningen, Germany, and then his sons joined him in the 1870s. A factory for clock springs was founded in 1886, and in 1899, which was after he had passed, a factory for clock cases was founded. So 1900 they had 1,000 employees, and with the crisis of 1923, the Depression and all, they still had 2,000 workers employed in 1930. So they made it through the Great Depression pretty well. And they were producing 45,000 movements a week in 1930s. 60% of German clocks exported to England came from the Mauthe clock factory. And then they went bankrupt in 1976. So they were in business for a long, long time. I found that pretty interesting. I can't really find this style of clock anywhere. This frame design, for the sites I've been able to find, I don't see any like this at all. It's a little bit fancier than their alarm clocks, because a lot of their more simple cases just had a face and then the movement mounted on the back. So this one's in an entire case, so that's a little bit different and unique. But anyway, we're going to get started taking this apart. I did play with that a little bit yesterday because it was so difficult for me to figure out how to take it apart. And so we're going to get started with that. So on the back you've got several buttons. This is the alarm shut off, and so it'll slide right through the back of this, but these are going to be in your way. And trying to figure out how to unscrew them was a little challenging. Well, we're starting and there's already a gnat. So I like to chew gum, and the gnats, every time I put a piece of gum in my mouth, here they come zooming around. Hopefully they won't annoy us too much in this video. Anyway, as I was saying, your two winders here, they were a little bit interesting to try to figure out how to get off, because no matter what you did, they didn't want to unscrew. What I found was if I wound them up all the way, then they have a backwards thread on them, and I was able to unscrew them. So wind your piece up all the way, and then this is not going to unscrew. See, you can't get anywhere, so wind your piece up all the way, and then it'll let you unscrew it. Okay, and then as far as the little button hands, they were on there real good. They didn't want to come off. So I got some little hand pullers, and they lifted off pretty easily with the hand pullers. They did yesterday. There it goes. No. There it goes. Okay. So I'm going to get these two unscrewed, and then I'll be back. Then the next obstacle that I came to was I could not get this back cover off. I tried pulling and prying. It would rock. It would lift a little bit on the top, not really on the bottom. And looking at it under the magnifying glass, someone had taken out these two screws, but there was one little tiny screw right here holding, this is what holds the whole back plate on these three screws. So these two were missing, and I did not see this one. It had a little bit of rust and was kind of discolored. I put it on a piece of tape here because it is that tiny that I would end up losing it for sure. It's very tiny and it had a very, very flat head. And it had a little tiny bit of rust in it. I wasn't even able to get a screwdriver in it good. So I had some saw blades for my little jeweler's saw. And I found the tiniest one. I think it's like a number -50 or something like that. And I was able to get it in the head slot and just slide it back and forth and get a little bit of that rust out so I could get a tiny little screwdriver in there and get that last screw out. So then I finally was able to get the back lifted off. But it took quite a bit of playing with it to even get this far, because there weren't any videos online to watch. So hopefully this will help somebody else get their Mauthe clock apart. A little bit of rust inside. I'll have that all cleaned up before I give it back to him. And then I was turning it over and looking at it, and a piece fell out. See that little piece right there? It's not attached to anything. So I'm like, oh, how am I going to get this out of the case? And the whole thing just falls off. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where does it really go? It looked like it had a little slot in one side. So I was guessing that it went on here, because the when this was on it, it didn't look like just a piece of metal. It looked more solid. So there was a clue on the inside due to the rust, luckily. You can see the arm right there, that little loop right there around the little slot where you adjust the speed. So I'm like, okay, yes, that's where it goes. So I felt a little better about that. Okay, then how to get this out of the case. I'm looking, I don't see any way. Like I'm thinking the hands need to come off. There's no way to really get in it from the front. The back is pressed together. I was able to get the back lifted off slowly. Probably not the best use of my hand pullers, but that's what I used, because they should be some type of hardened steel. And so we have a back. So normally, if you look, what's holding this faceplate into the clock, there's two little arms that stick out there, and they're threaded. So there should be some kind of threaded nut, threaded screw. You can see the screw marks on the bottom of the case, a little bit of an imprint. But somebody had taken those two out, and they're lost like the two of these three screws. But it's still not going to come out because there's two in the top right here also. And that's what holds your handle on. So I'm up to the point of trying to figure out how to get these to turn and let me get it loose enough to get the handle out so I can get these two unscrewed. So I'll figure that out and join you back, because I have not been successful so far. I did oil this side of it and rock it without the hands on. It did run last night for about 4 hours. I set it for 7:45, and I just would rock it every so often. And about 8:17, it started running on its own. Once the oil kind of loosened things up a little bit, and then it ran until 2:25 in the morning. So it ran for about 4 hours once I got things freed up a little bit. So that's a positive sign that I can actually get it working at some point. So let me figure out how to actually remove it from this case. I I gently turned this one, and it's going to come forward enough to let that piece come out. So yay, that wasn't too bad. I was trying to do both of them at the same time, like push that one that way and that one that way, and it was just make it tighter. But if you just turn one gently, the little foot is short enough that it lets it pass it up. And there is a little washer on each one of these screws. Okay, so this looks like it's just kind of press fitted in with these pieces in the corners here. I'm just going to try to ease it out of there. Yeah, good luck. Not the easing type. It does let me push it gently from the front, and the glass is coming out with it. Yeah, okie dokie. Come on, little clock. You're almost there. The little corner piece is hitting on this little riveted in foot right there. So you got to bring it out straight or it's not going to slide. There's like no clearance. Okay. And there's our face. That's going to clean up pretty good. Little schmutz around the edges where this was up against it and it rusted a little bit, so it put a little bit of stuff on the face, but the face rests here in the glass. Isn't that cool? Little design they cut on the glass there. Okay, case looks in decent shape. Alright, let me get a little more light on this. Okay, I think I can get this outside piece off with these two screws. Doesn't want to come out. That screw just does not want to let go there. Okay, so not the screw holding it up. When I looked, the spring here for the alarm, the shutoff does not want to stay in to keep this thing from alarming and unwinding. So anyway, the spring was rubbing against that little piece of case. and keeping me from being able to slide it off. So I'm going to wind this up all the way. It won't stay. Okay, it's wound all the way so that now I can unscrew that piece again. The spring on the alarm is a lot smaller than the spring on the time. And I'm curious to see how the end of this loop is, because I can see that it's a loop spring on this post right here, but it's very long. I can see both pieces of the loop going way up over here. Most loop springs are riveted pretty close to the post so that it's real snug on the post. This one has a very long loop. And this one is riveted right here, tying onto the post with the screw. So there are screws on the posts that hold the springs. Both of those have a post next to them, but that just holds the frame on to the face. I'm hoping I can just slide it up and off now that I've got those screws out. I only took 2 screws out, so obviously there's a third one missing there too. Let's let the alarm unwind. So the alarm hits on the inside of this case to make sound. And then that button just pushes down into these teeth for the shut off. But it's not staying down in there when it's in the clock. When it's all in the case, it wants to pop back up out of there. Okay, I'm going to flip these mounts over and take my hands off, and hopefully that'll let me slide the movement off of this face plate. Alright, I'm flipped over and I want to protect this face. It's really in nice shape. It's got some stripes across it. I don't know if they reflect also, but we will light it up in the dark before we're all done just to see what it looks like. I've only got 3 mounts on here, which is making me a little unsteady. Let me put the 4th one. I'm trying not to do anything to the face. I'm able to clip onto the side mounting screws on the top, but on the bottom I've got to put it on the face, so I was trying to not do any more than I had to. Helps if you turn it the right direction. Alright, that gives me a little stability. Not level, but and you see it's not level. Okay, here we go. I don't think there's enough lip to catch on that. I'm flat all the way and it's not really doing anything. time for a little oil. Alright, I've got a bit of oil dropped on there. This hour hand is actually pressure fitted, like it's got a spring under it. So I'm going to mash it down, which lets me get a little bit higher under this one where my hand puller will actually start to lift it up. And over here might actually come the rest of the way. There goes my foot again. So I will take this hand off and I'll be back. I was able to get the minute hand off that way, and the hour hand was no problem. It slid off easily. I don't know if I need to take this alarm hand off to get this movement out. Probably. But it is very flush to the case. I can't really get under it. So I think I'm going to try to take it off without removing that. See if it'll lift off of here. So that side is definitely loose. This side is not. So much to explore on this clock. That definitely comes out of there. But this shaft, this little short shaft that had the screw through it, is definitely loose. This is the long shaft that had a not wanting to let go. And one here. So short one up front, and then two longer ones. And they move a little bit, but they must screw on there somehow. I'm going to have to open the plate, it looks like. Because it looks like this piece, it might be screwed onto this base right here, which is holding the whole base plate on. So I guess I'm ready to take this off. Not my usual order of taking things off of a clock. I put the little hand back on the alarm because I was turning it to make sure I hadn't bent anything, and made sure I had clearance between the end of that second hand and each one of these numbers and bars as it went across. And it did not move it, so that was good. And I went to my duct tape, because my masking tape, because that's the least abrasive surface I've got, but still gives me a little bit of traction and is flat. These guys, I never have had luck working with them. My set is not very good. There's one that's not deep enough. I can't get it on. It always wants to fall off, and they're not the same height. So I bought a lathe recently, and I'll probably be making a new set of bars for this so that they're all the same length, and maybe deepening the one that's too short that doesn't want to hold on. Okay, so anyway, let's find a little nut socket that'll go on that tiny nut. I studied this a little bit more. I started to loosen these. I found the right socket, 5 30-seconds, sorry, and realized I about made a big mistake because I had not let this down yet. So I put this back on here so I'd have something to hold to let it down. It's really hard to get to the click spring down under there. So I studied it a little bit more, and there's some reason there was a slot in these little holes, so I thought, let me try. And they do unscrew which is letting this whole silver shaft come up, and it's going to release the clock from the face, so I will be able to reach the click spring a little bit easier, I do believe, if I take it off the face. So if you notice something like a screw hole and it's got slots, there's got to be some reason, and you can investigate further. You might save yourself a little bit of trouble. Alright, now I want to see if it's going to come off with the second hand alarm. Yes, perfect. I don't have to take the alarm hand off. There's the alarm. And pieces are falling off, just like last time. I've got to pay more attention. Okay, I'm trying to show you this and not looking at this, and so this fell off of my movement. So, a similar design with this ring coming around. It's got a little ramp and a cut off here, so it cuts off sharp and then ramps back around. That is triggered usually by an arm on your alarm that when it drops off the cliff there, it signals the alarm, gives it enough room for everything to turn, and then as your gear turns, it slowly comes back up this ramp and works its way back around to 12 hours later falling off the ramp again. So I will not take that piece off. And it looks like the only thing that I see that would be on that ramp is this little outcropping that they punched in the wheel itself, the gear. That's your alarm trigger. So possibly, no, it's going to go every 12 hours. I thought possibly it would be every 24, but that is going to make a turn every 24 hours. That's got a spring under it. That's where you turn your dial for your alarm. This is the time turning dial right here on that little tab. Nope, doesn't match up. Time turning dial goes all the way through the middle. Alarm turning arbor is right here. And that's just going to slide straight out of there, it feels like. Alright, so this is the whole alarm mechanism. This little bent piece of metal that's flexible. When it pops up, it takes the little foot out of this hole and lets your alarm bell go off. So when it's down, when it's not time for it to go off, it can't. But you see how high this one's up in the air? That's why the alarm goes off no matter what when the clock's put together, because it's not deactivating it. Yeah, maybe it is when it's all put together. Okay, right now it's all supposition. It's pretty clean looking little clock. Anyway, I'm going to get a few more pictures now that I've gotten the face off of it, and then I will let this down and join you again. And I need something to hold this tiny movement. I don't know what I can put it on. We'll figure out something. The click spring is mounted on this side, comes around, has a little bend on it, pushes on the end of the click right here. And when I looked at it real close under the magnifying glass, the click is kind of oblong, so there's an end of it that goes into the gear, but this end of it is a little tab sticking out, so I can push down on it. Let me wind a little bit. And I'm sorry if you can't see this, it's so tiny. Oh, I'm unscrewing it wrong way. Wind a tiny bit to get the click raising up out of the groove, and push on the far end of the click. It'll let it unwind, and it's going to beat your hand up with the key, but it'll let you get it unwound. So I'm going to finish unwinding that. So as you can see with them unwound all the way, the time side spring is a lot bigger than the alarm spring, and also it's a heavier spring. This one's a lot thicker than this one is. So before I take these 4 nuts off, I want to remove this little balance wheel with the hairspring, because if I just pull it apart, there's a pin in it holding it here, and it's going to stretch it out. So I'm going to remove that first. And I've taken some pictures as far as how much of the hair is hanging out. There's a bit down here you can see. But I don't know if that's in the right spot or not, because there's a bend right there in the hairspring, and then there's an extra piece of tail. So normally the bend is where it goes through the frame, so I don't know if someone's pulled it down a little bit. When I get it all put back together, I'll have to see how it's keeping time, because if you got too much pulled down there, the hairspring is pulled too small, and no matter how loose that you make it to run slow, it's going to run too fast. So I'm going to have to see when I put it back together and run it on the test stand. Let's take the pin out. And then you can just rotate your balance wheel and slip the hair out of that hole right there that the pin goes in. And it might turn enough to let you slide it all the way through the speed regulator right there, but a lot of times with the little crimp on the end of it, it won't come through. It is trying to come through. Sometimes you got to help it a little bit with some tweezers, tease it out of there a little bit. There's our friendly gnat back again. Okay, so now we're loose from everything there. So I can loosen this side and this will come out. I saw somebody on one site had made a little special wrench that fits on these, because there's not really anything. You could use an adjustable wrench, I guess. And there it's falling to the side, so I know I'm loose enough. Let me get my tweezers. And just ease it out of that cup. It jumped back through the speed regulator. So now I'm at the precarious point of this is how you can damage your spring, because it's not, the balance wheel is not secured anywhere, and any pressure that's on it is only on the spring. Okay, now we're loose. So there is a teeny tiny little pin on there that goes on my fork, and there's a little notch cut out of the collar right there. You want that pin in the middle of that collar on this side. The hairspring looks really good. It's still really round everywhere, concentric circles, so that's good. It's in good shape. So I'm going to be looking under a magnifying glass to check these tips. Sometimes they get a little bit dull on the end. This and this should be the only points contacting inside these screws. There's a little cup drilled out, so it's very little pressure. You want it to be really pointed and spinning freely in there. So check the tips of those. And when you put it back together, you're going to put a tiny little bit of oil in that cup too. So this is under the magnifier, and you'll notice this side looks more blunted than the other side. This side looks pretty pointy. This side looks a little bit blunted. So when I polish these up, I will put a little bit more of a point back on this side. You want it to be nice and sharp. And no little burrs or spurs. And that one is not as pointy. That one feels pointy. That one feels smooth. So with wear, that little point wears down. But it's got to be perfectly centered. So this would be a great lathe job. I might play with my lathe for the first time. Not that there's any way to hold it on a lathe because of that collar being right there. And I don't want to take that off because it is where it's supposed to be. Yeah, now that I've got it under the magnifier, I can see that there's 2 pins. There's not just one pin under here. There's a pin here and pin here. You can't see that. Let me see. There's a little pin right there and a little pin right there. And they're both centered in this little cutout groove right there. So I will not be taking that collar off and trying to put it on the lathe because then the pins would be in the way too. But I will try to hand polish it a little bit and get it a little more pointy. This is the screw that was on the opposite side of this one holding the balance wheel. So this is the little setup for it. This is the lever that you turn to speed and slow down the clock. And this is what's actually moving with a little tiny slot in it and your hair spring through it. And when you adjust this, it slides it up and down on the hairspring. But it's several pieces, so the screw goes through, and then this little washer's got a stop on it, so when you put it back together you put it in the little hole on the case. And this is all one piece. A little rusty up under there, and you want it to slide smoothly. You want a little bit of oil under that, because when it's jerky when you slide it is when it jumps on the hairspring and bunches up your hairspring and causes damage inside your clock. So make sure this little piece, when you put it together, is clean and sliding nicely in the slot and on the hairspring. Alright, now let's take these nuts off. And I've loosened this as much as I can, let all the power off, but it's still got some pressure against the posts, so hopefully it's not gonna spring out and mess up all my wheels in there. And I expect this little alarm piece to come up with it. I think I don't have to take that off. I think it's going to come through the hole. I'm trying to hold the spring down here. I want it to come into my hand instead of up into the clock as I loosen it. I guess I got ahead of myself because some things on the front are keeping me from opening this. Okay, pause and regroup. Nothing had to come off of the front to open this. That's the back, sorry. I'll show you the front in a second. This is I took this spring off of the arbor there. Great wheel, and this is what I was talking about. The loop end seemed really long, so it doesn't have the typical stopping right there with a rivet in it. They just bent the whole thing in an extra long loop to let it apply pressure and keep it on the post that way. I've got the pieces all just setting back in. I used my little frame to set it on to give me some length for the minute arbor there. And the trickiest part of the whole thing was this piece right here that's about to fall out again. I'm going to flip this over. So there's nothing holding this. This is the hour adjustment and trigger, and it just pokes through a hole on the front right here. And I couldn't figure out where it went. There's that little piece just falls right off of it, but it's got the graduated tip that goes around on this double-ended pin on the end of that. Washer, spring washer, and so trying to find what hole that went in when that fell out took me a few minutes, but it looks really clean, you know, so I'm like, well, should I even put it through the ultrasound? It looks really clean. Should I just oil it and put it back together? But when you zoom in and look at pictures, there's a lot of rust in there. So I'm going to clean all these parts up real well before I put it back together. So the ultrasound's warming up, and I'm going to take a little mother's polish to the case and clean it up a bit. Alright, the parts are clean. I found some probably florist wire, not really sure. Found this out in the garage so I could wind up my springs and get them back, the arbors back in the holes and the loops back on the posts. I would suggest doing that before you put your other parts on, because I already had the other parts on. Then I tried to slip these in, and that didn't work very well because there's too much pressure. So I had to take them back off and get these on. So now I'm going to put the other parts back on, which go which way? This one's bigger, so it goes this way. That can't be right. No, it's not. I'm looking at the wrong post. And then this little guy, I'm going to go do a big clock next time. But I think I'm almost ready to put the case on and oil it, so then I'll probably take a little break. Alright, my alarm goes on. This little bit of a hub right there goes in this hole that sticks out. And it goes under everything. Check your pins that are on it, make sure they're straight. There's 2 pins on it, and they hit this wheel right here, much like an escapement wheel and pallet pins to make the alarm go off. Alright, this little guy goes pointing up so that its leaf pinion can hit your alarm winder. I feel like I'm working on a pocket watch. This is just tiny. I didn't know what I was getting myself in for. Okay, you see what I'm going to do. I'm going to put these pieces back together. Alright, all the pieces are in. I've just put this little balance wheel back in. It's trying to turn a little bit because I don't really have it wound up yet. It's running flat, it's running straight up and down, not running when I flip it that way. So I know it either needs to be wound or it's just not quite in beat, so I'm going to put a couple winds on it and see what it does. Still wants to stop that way. So if it's lying on its back, it stops. If the clock's lying on its face, it's going to run. If it's on every side except its back, it's going to run. I did not show y'all the plate once it got cleaned up. That's the little maker's mark. F. Mauthe, Germany. And then over here, unadjusted nodules. Alright, well, let's see if this little bad boy is going to run. It's wound up enough, it should be running. I think I will go ahead and wind it a bit more and take that wire off. Carefully, since my hairspring is up there, so I think I'm going to cut this wire. So one thing I'm not crazy about still on this design is this alarm clock shut off. It does not want to stay in. I've bent it down some more. If it's got a little wind on it, it seems to help, but it's got to be pushed into one of the little find anything. There we go. It's got to be pushed into one of these little pieces on this wheel that the little pivot pins go into. And then when the alarm starts going, any little bump, it pops out of there. And it doesn't want to stay back in there. So it's frustrating. I've bent it down a little bit. It seemed to hold a little bit better because it was barely going on the edge of it. It's dog play hour apparently. Just what you want when you're working on a balance wheel, right? Two 70-pound dogs wrestling behind you. It's got good motion. And there goes my alarm again. I'm going to figure out a way to make that thing actually shut off and stay off. I think it's just not bent right. There's a spring on it that helps it pop back out so that when it goes off and it gets easily bumped off of there to come on again. Doesn't take, it's a hair trigger, like boop, you move it, it's off and going off again. Anyway, maybe I'll figure out something. I don't have oil on this yet. I did oil these guys with the Keystone mainspring lubricant. And I bought that because one clock that I worked on had the barrel springs in it, and when I opened the barrels I knew it had a different oil. I could tell it was a different oil than what you usually find, and it was a dense oil, but it didn't run anywhere. It was very interesting. So I got some to try it, and I like it so far. I put it on there, and it just stays where it's supposed to, but it's like super slick. So anyway, enough of that. If I can keep my fingers off of that and the alarm quits going off long enough, I'll let that run for a little while. And the only piece that's left is this piece that goes on the front. I had it laying on this so I could find it on this dark towel. This post has the spring washer and a pin that goes through it all the way. So it makes a T right there. And then this last little wheel has two of those little ramp and drop off things. So when this is on the end of that and you turn this, it's turning your hour. The hour that you're setting for your alarm. And it just slips through from the front. The face of the clock holds that on. There's nothing holding that on. And it keeps trying to fall out, so I'm not going to put it in until the very last when I'm ready to put it back in the case, because the only thing holding it in is the hand that goes on the back of it. I've cleaned the case up, cleaned the face up some, cleaned the case up some, cleaned the glass up. Overall, pretty good. Pretty nice. So we will get it back in there shortly. Oiling everything, and I wanted to show you something. I put a little drop of oil inside of each end of this balance wheel, but look, can you see? the balance wheel can move in the cup. That's too much movement. That's probably why it won't run when it's on its back, because it gets in a spot where it's not in the cup anymore. So it's hard to know how tight to adjust these things. Usually you just snug them down. And that feels pretty tight to me. I may need to tighten the one on the other side, because it didn't really make any difference. It's still pretty darn loose in there. Yep. I know I'm probably not staying on camera. It's hard to do with the magnifier. It's so hard to turn. Okay, let's see how wiggly it is now. Still pretty wiggly. So I'm going to work on this a little bit more where I can see it better. I hope y'all can see that. Yes, you want end shake, but there's not much end shake on this piece. It just spins on the very tips, and it definitely doesn't go side to side like that. So I'm going to work on it where I can see a little better. Just wanted to share that tip for you. I mean, it seems like it was close because it was running in so many positions, but now that I tightened it, it doesn't seem to be running in as many positions. So a little fine tuning to do still. So this is what I did. You're going to slip up if you hold your pliers like so. I came this way and I gave it 1/4 of a turn or less. Still got some end shake. Still got a little bit of wobble. But it wants to run every which way that I turn it. And usually when I take these out, I do not take both of these out. I leave one in there for reference for where it was before, so I only take out the side that's got the fast slow adjuster on it. I do make sure the little cup inside that one is cleaned well. And once you get it back in there, you're going to want to slide this back and forth and make sure it doesn't bind up anywhere. This one is really hard to turn now that I tightened that. It digs into my finger. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Push this, check it in this in the fast position, in the slower position. Make sure that it's sliding through the little slot on there good, not pinching up on your hairspring. And it not wanting to run when it's that one position may be what I showed you, the one side being a little bit blunted. If I could keep my fingers off of it, it would help. So definitely not going to want to run on its back. Alright, I'd say it's pretty consistently staying running. I'll tell my son not to leave it lying on its back. Let's get this last piece on there and put it back together. It's lying on its back and it's running. I put this little pressure spring one on there that turns this, and almost left out the thing that turns the hands. So I did put a little bit of oil inside that, smear it around real good, slide that on. So this is ready to go back on here, and it's a It's a weird orientation. And you see that wants to fall right off of there. It's very strange that there's not things that hold these pieces together. So it's not straight up and down on this balance wheel. It's off to one side. My parts in there aren't wanting to go together right. Maybe I should have put it on that way. Because the spring that's pushing my minute hand up is not meshing good with that little one next to it. And this guy totally fell out again. Like, this is... Alright, washer, spring washer, double rampy part, pulling it down. Alright, now put the face on this way. Holes, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. And 3. Okay. Now I have to turn it over to put those screw things in. Alright, let me get my something soft. Alright. Gotta put my eyeballs on. Ah, look, it's a clock. So I have 2 of these. That doesn't fit there, so that's obviously not where it goes. But I'm guessing there was one like this that was maybe a little bit smaller that went in that hole. Or maybe it never had one at all. I don't know. I think whoever tried to get in this before did not succeed because of the one tiny screw still in it. Alright. We have a tiny hour hand. And the minute hand. So this skinny one has this shaft right here that goes through it all the way down to the bottom. And I've wound up the springs so I can slide this down on there. And it still doesn't want to slide on. But my battery is almost dead, so I'm going to slide this on and slip it into the case here. So I just want to finish up with this little guy here. Been running great all day. I did not test it for days. I just went ahead and put it back in the case. No problems putting this top back on. I found 2 screws that would fit in the bottom that were missing. Not a chance. I searched every screw I've got. Nothing tiny enough to fill in those 2 missing ones in the center there. But it's got the one holding this back plate on. And it can't come off anyway because of the other parts holding it on. But it would be nice to have it secured. I mean, it's not rocking or anything. But anyway, it's come out pretty nicely. I was able to get the top part tight enough to, I like my little handles to be able to stand up sometimes, you know, and it wasn't before. So I screwed one in all the way and then screwed the other one in most of the way, and the holes were not going to line up, so I switched them because obviously the holes lined up before I took it apart, right? So I switched them and they lined up good, and you can just tighten one down almost all the way, stick the end in, have this one almost ready to tighten all the way, stick the end in, and then snug it down, and it'll be straight across, and it'll be snug. And these hold the top brackets of the clock itself, the movement. So those at the top, these 2 at the bottom hold the faceplate. So yeah, that's all I can think of. I'm just been running it, and I'm waiting to like make some time adjustments. It's been keeping good time. I put it pretty much, well, I thought I had it in the middle of that little slot there as far as the plus and minus. It looks like it's more toward the minus. I had it pretty much in the middle, I thought, of where the hairspring adjustment was. So there's not as much minus as you can go, but there's more plus you can go. But I haven't had to budget, and it's staying right on. So I think it worked out pretty good. I think he'll be happy with this little clock. That's not the camera acting up. There are actually little reflective stripes across the front of the face like that. It's a pretty cute little clock. I'm guessing it's an Art Deco, maybe 1940-ish. 10, 15 years either side of that. But yeah, probably 1940s, good estimate. Not a bad looking little clock at all. The little feet are built on, these little guys. I'm trying to show you and hold this at the same time. These little guys are riveted on, so I wanted to get a Philister screw that was flat enough to fit up under there, and I was able to find one with the right thread that would go up under there. So I'm just waiting to see if the alarm is going to go off. I set it for 4 o'clock. It is still ticking nicely. Let's see what it's going to do. You hear another ticking because I've got the Oompa Player cuckoo clock on the test stand right beside me. And it doesn't have the pendulum on, so it's ticking away like crazy. Come on, little alarm. I set it for 4 o'clock, so it should be going off any minute. This isn't the first time I've tried the alarm. I tried it several other hours too, and it was going off early. So that's why I'm like, oh, it should have probably already gone off. It's wound, I'm pretty sure. Make sure the stem's pulled out in the back. If I lean it back on it, it shuts it off. Every time you put it back in the case prematurely, like leave it out and test it for a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week if you really don't want to have to take it apart again. Because now the alarm's not going off. Well, if it doesn't ever go off, there'll be another part to this video. Otherwise, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I looked and I didn't see any of this clock out there as far as videos people working on, so I hope this helps somebody. I would have enjoyed finding one to figure out how to get it apart. See you guys later. Well, as soon as I shut the video camera off, it went off. So all is well. So I'm just going to watch it for until I see my son again and make sure it's keeping time like it's supposed to. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Watch pot never boils, right? Bye.